When you think about the size and scope of and geopolitical significance of the U.S. military, it's especially appropriate for us to welcome to this forum the 17th Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Mike Mullen. He serves as the principal military advisor to the President, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council, and the Homeland Security Council. He leads an American institution of more than 2 million soldiers, sailors, members of the Marines and the Air Force, an institution in which the society invests well over $600 billion a year. The chairman leads an organization, most crucially, that provides our nation's necessary point of engagement in a dangerous and complicated world, though he would be the first to say that it must be only one part of the whole web of strong diplomatic, civic, and economic relationships across the globe.
What this is the beginning of an effort to connect with communities, quite frankly, throughout the country to talk about the challenges we face, certainly to connect with America as much as we possibly can, and then inside those challenges, very specifically, through community-based support, be able to reach out and connect with those who've served in the military and those who've sacrificed so much. What I see here very quickly, obviously, at Columbia is tremendous support for military veterans, and that is greatly supported, I think, by the new GI Bill. You've obviously been very aggressive in your ability to both find the students and connect those benefits, and I think those are huge, not just now, but well into the future. And I believe that investment on the part of America and Columbia specifically will be paid back tenfold at least over the course of the next decade. And the dreams haven't changed. Our young men and women still want an education. They'd like to have a family. They'd like to have their kids go to schools. They'd like to get an education. They'd like jobs, and they'd like to own a piece of the rock. And their path, however, has changed in many cases dramatically. So I'm hopeful to be able to, over the course of the next year, spend time with communities throughout the country that would pick up this challenge. And I know I call it actually a sea of goodwill. It's not a nautical term, even though I'm in the Navy. But it does represent what Deborah and I and many others have experienced throughout the country. There are people, citizens throughout the country, who want to help. The question is, how do they connect? And we've been frustrated in that, and we're working our way through how to make those connections. This effort is central to that. So, and even to speak to the relationship now that the military has, the growing relationship that the military has with Columbia and other northeastern universities, and I think we can do a great deal more than we have. I mean, that's you talked about a transformative moment. That's, to me, I think a very accurate description of where we are, and we need to take advantage of that. The tremendous opportunity that is here, just the military veterans I met today that are in school here, and again, the investment in America through them will just pay off in ways that I can't even imagine.
How are things going from your point of view in both Afghanistan and Iraq?
You want to spend the rest of the...
Just an overview.
Iraq is actually certainly still a huge challenge, but they've had elections. They are in the process right now, the democratic process of forming a government. I'm happy to report from what I both read in the media and see, as well as just my visits, that the vast majority of issues in Iraq are political. And so you see politicians who represent people in Iraq jockeying for a position in who's going to lead Iraq into the future. The sacrifices that were made there, the over 4,300 lives we've lost there, truly have created an opportunity for the Iraqi people that did not exist before. So we'll see. And then in Afghanistan, we're at a point now where I believe we've got the strategy right. We're resourcing the strategy. As you indicated, the answer, as it was in Iraq, is not military alone. We've got to create the security so that the governance and the development and the economy, those things, can start to move in the right direction. I was just in Marja the other day where, from a military standpoint, it's been very successful, but it's early. It's tentative. I think I was there a month ago. That was day 45. So, and I think a huge indicator will clearly be where we end up as the strategy proceeds vis-a-vis Kandahar over the summer. The goal is to change the momentum. It's changing. We see those indicators, but I don't really think we'll have a good feel for that until the end of the year. So I think we're in a good place, but key to it is clearly going to be, does Afghanistan stand up? Do they start to lead? I worry a great deal specifically about Iran now and in the future. I worry about Iran achieving a nuclear weapons capability. There are those that say, come on, Mullen, get over that. They're going to get it. Let's deal with it. Well, dealing with it has unintended consequences that I don't think we've all thought through. I worry that other countries in the region will then seek to, actually I know they will seek nuclear weapons as well. And I think that spiral headed in that direction is a very bad outcome. I worry, on the other hand, I worry a great deal about striking Iran. I've been very public about that because of the unintended consequences of that. So the diplomatic, the engagement piece, the sanctions piece, all those things, from my perspective, need to be addressed to possibly have Iran change its mind about where it's headed. Clearly, I've spent a lot of time in Pakistan, a lot of time engaging Pakistan. That both, when I say broader Middle East, I include South Central Asia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, the region, the linkage in a region between those two countries, and obviously India, with whom we have a very positive and growing relationship, is a key player in all this as well. So I think for certainly the next 10 to 20 years, that I don't see that part of the world receding in that regard. Some of what I worry about is with the energy in the Central Command area, Iraq, Afghanistan, the broader Middle East, that we could very well, we could be not paying enough attention, somewhere else. So I work hard to try to make sure and I'm not saying we are, but with that focus, we have to work hard to keep focused in other places. Yep. I worry a great deal about our own hemisphere. I mean, I grew up in Southern California. I was in Mexico City 5 or 6 weeks ago. And the drug wars that are going on there, the resourcing of those, the guns, the money, the habit, the potential instability is also something of concern. And I think we need to just be paying attention to our own hemisphere, if you will, in ways that we haven't in the past. Actually, on top of all that, though, and this was highlighted, I think, last week with President Obama's nuclear summit, the summit that involved some 46 countries, I think, is what scares me the most right up front is terrorists and nuclear weapons. We know that they have a goal to get their hands on them. We know that they want to still kill as many Americans as they possibly can. And so while al-Qaeda in Iraq is greatly diminished, and we've had some success against al-Qaeda in the Afghanistan-Pakistan area, that threat's not going away, and it's not going away near term. And I don't think it can be won kinetically. That's, in the long run, that's not going to be the way it gets won. The way that gets won eventually is to be able to support those, support the Muslims throughout the world who say that's enough. And over time, and they represent values we care a lot about, and that this outfit that has seized this religion in the most negative way actually is no longer supported by the Muslims who support them. That's the long-term approach there. But that's tied to relationships with countries who create economic value and education and future for young, particularly young males, who when they're 15 or 16 years old have to make a decision about what they're going to do and need to be put on a positive track as opposed to the one they're on, many of them are on right now.
I think this is probably something you don't want to answer, so I'll just put it in there and you can then ask a question on top of it. You just go to the other question. But I think there's a question whether there is any military option for Iran. Is there actually something, or is it only diplomatic? Put that aside. I doubt you're going to answer that.
What was your question?
Yeah, the question. So I'd like to ask about about journalism.
Now that I know a lot about.
And the military. So recently, David Ignatius, whom you know, and from the Washington Post, was here, and we had a panel. And one of the things David said was worried about, from the journalist standpoint, about being embedded. And yet, very difficult for journalists to get information about what is happening around the world without being embedded, because it's very dangerous, not clear you can get around, and so on. So a kind of tension. And he was using the word embedded in a more metaphorical sense than simply, going into Iraq and being in a tank. And I think the big question is not journalists and embedded. It's the American population getting the information it needs.
Yeah. When I think about being embedded, fundamentally, I think we changed all of that in 2003 when we embedded so many reporters. Mm-hmm. And the goal was to be able to tell the story. And I think that's really important. Certainly, from my perspective, I take reporters on just about every single trip I go on because I want them to tell the story. Yep. And I give my view, but I certainly don't constrain them on where they go and who they interview on these trips, because, for me, this is Vietnam again. It is really important that we as a country understand what we're doing. So Deborah and I spend a lot of time with families of the fallen, Deborah in particular. We go to Arlington to go to the funerals, and we spend time with those who have been wounded, because that is the toughest part of this war, those who've lost so much. And it's very important for me that America understand what's going on, and then, in the democracy in which we exist, make decisions about what we're going to do. And Secretary Gates went forward and changed the policy at Dover. I was a very strong supporter of that. As difficult as that is, it is important that families get to see their loved ones when they come back, having sacrificed so much, and if they choose to do it at that moment, we should give them that choice. So that's a huge, that approach is a huge driver for me, so that we understand what we're doing, and then the president makes a decision, and we march off. So for the journalism side, I think David and others, I think the journalism community has to work its way through that, figure out if they're getting spun or not. There's no active, from my perspective, there's no active goal to spin them, but I think that's something that they're going to have to continue to struggle with in order to tell that story. I don't know how else to tell it. I've said many times, all options remain on the table. And as I indicated earlier, the diplomatic engagement piece is the lead piece and much. But we in the Pentagon, we plan for contingencies all the time. And so certainly that there are options which exist shouldn't surprise anybody. What the mainstream of that article talked about, which is in today's New York Times, is that we have no policy, and that the implication is that we're not working on it. I assure you, this is as complex a problem as there is in our country, and we have expended extraordinary amounts of time and effort to figure that out, to try to get that right. And I'd want people to be comfortable that that's the case. And Secretary Gates has led that effort. It's also worked within the administration. It does represent, however, a very, very tough problem.
Admiral Mullen, thank you very much for coming to Columbia.
Thanks.